Yeah. So anyway, you said we're talking about spirituality. And I was thinking today, because, the other day I sent you a message and I said, well, spirituality versus religion, right? As though they're against each other somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but like also there's other alternatives, right? Like it's not just religious or spiritual is what it takes. And I think oftentimes if you're in a spiritual program, they stress the spiritual side, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in a psychological or a medical program, they stress the physical, the psychological, the brain health side, right?
Yep.
Like
Yeah, absolutely.
there's a free program on from Alberta Health called the Brain Story, right?
Oh, is there?
And it's really interesting, man. And if you're interested, I know you are, in learning about like addiction, take the Brain Story.
Cool. I'll have to write that down. Not
Yeah, man,
now.
it's free. Yeah, whenever. You don't have to do anything right now, man. We're just talking. Um,
But that'd be pretty cool.
yes, yeah. So anyway, I was just thinking about that too, because like to limit it, it's not like it's limited to just spiritual, religious, or otherwise. Like there is an opportunity. And when I say otherwise, I'm speaking of basically like Buddhism, which is kind of like a hybrid,
Yeah.
right? It's definitely got theology in it.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the definition of theology, I suppose, probably doesn't quite cover it. But I had an interesting conversation on this subject today with a friend of mine and a colleague, and we were talking about the harm that the church has done.
Hmm.
And I mean, no better time to talk about it than right now, right? Like with
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and also, of course, because we're going to keep the conversation going as long as we absolutely can, right? Because it needs to
Absolutely.
keep going.
Yeah.
But just looking at the fact that this harm that's been done,
Yeah.
it's not just like hundreds of years ago,
No.
right? So
No.
so I just learned today, and I mean I might have this number wrong because I didn't write it down when I was talking with my colleague, and he said that 210,000 people in France have been molested by the Catholic Church since 1950.
Wow.
210,000 reported cases. That's
Wow.
reported, Matt.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I didn't fact check that, and obviously we can. But it popped into my head as I was thinking about this podcast, because it's like that. It's important to remember that some of the structures that are in place are very harmful, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert on what is harmful and what isn't in terms of like ideology, really. I
No.
mean, unless it's obvious. Um, Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's where you have to rely on people's experiences, though, because like
Mhm.
we've talked about this before. Everybody experiences trauma differently. So like what might not be trauma to someone else is
Yeah.
for others. And so I think like the harm that certain religions and have done to a lot of people over the years, I can see why people would turn away if they're trying to get sober and people start talking about
Mhm.
God. You got to
Yeah.
bring God into your life, and it's like, well, that's what
Yeah.
the last guy told me when this happened, and I don't think so.
Well, the numbers I just gave you are just for France. So
Yeah,
that is literally one country.
yeah,
Okay. And you and I
exactly.
both know it goes much deeper than that,
Oh
right?
yeah,
With
yeah.
a organization such as that Catholic Church, which
Hmm.
has its seed in every piece of land on this planet, just about,
Yeah,
if not every piece of land.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, which to me is kind of mind-boggling that this is still happening, even though we know all kinds of things about what they do, right?
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
which, like to your point about people coming in figuring that, well, I don't believe in God,
Yeah,
so what am I going to do,
yeah,
right? And the truth of the matter is, anyone can get and stay sober, right?
yeah,
Obviously, what a person needs to do is something different than what they're doing in the moment. That's
yeah,
all,
exactly.
really,
Yeah,
right? Is find something that works for
yeah,
them. But that also, hopefully, now this is me talking about myself for a minute. I just want to find something that's not harmful to others, right? Or myself.
yeah, totally.
Something, and when I say harmful, I'm thinking of what's going to separate me from you,
Yeah,
right? I don't want those. Those ideas are harmful, right?
Yeah.
And they're not true, right?
Yeah.
It's just not true. There is no natural reason why you and I should be enemies,
Yeah.
right? Any
Yeah.
more than there's any natural reason why we should be friends, besides the fact that we're both humans,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And that we have a natural respect for each other,
Yeah.
you know. But it's just weird. I don't know. My mind is wide open,
Mhm.
but I believe there's room for all of those things. Not in the form that we've come to know it. That's for sure.
Well,
I
and I
don't.
think that's the downside of it all, is that it creates animosity right away. Like, depending on what type of Christian you are, or, atheists and Christians and things like that. So like right away, you're kind of coming in like us versus them mentality.
Right.
When in reality, like, I think anytime that you're doing something where you're looking inward, which recovery, you're looking inward
Mhm.
to try to ferret out these things, right?
Yeah.
I think you naturally are a lot of people would be naturally gravitate towards some sort of higher meaning or spiritual power or God or something like
Mhm.
that gives them, I don't know if it's hope, but it just gives them like there's something bigger.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's important for a lot of people, but then other people don't need that. So I think it's tough because you're already kind of have that animosity, when we really should
Mhm.
just be like, hey, do what works for you and I'll do what works for me, and we'll both be
Yeah.
happy.
Well, yeah, I think what you just said, we'll both be happy. We can all be happy if we do that,
Yeah.
right? And oddly enough, it was an atheist that kind of like hit that switch for me in a meeting
Yeah.
once. It was like probably, well, however long this guy's sober, I'll have to ask him. It's almost been a decade though, for sure.
Wow.
When I heard him say it, and it stuck with me. And I think about it every time someone starts like making a judgment, or even when I start judging in my head, right? Like
Mhm.
if I start, making a judgment about somebody, I remember that there's a lot of room in the boat.
Yeah.
There's room enough for everybody, right? Like, and
Yeah, that's right.
and all we have to do is enter into this agreement that we will respect each other enough that we'll leave
Yeah.
each other alone if we have to,
Yeah.
right? Like if our beliefs are so opposing, right, then at least we can do is leave each other alone,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if we can't learn to accept, we have to figure a way out to leave each other alone, right?
Well, and especially in times like that where people, you need space. So it's like,
Mhm.
nobody needs to be fighting about that. Nobody needs to be arguing about it. What works, like, if you found God and that's what works for you,
Mhm.
then you keep going in that direction. But just don't,
Yeah.
just, and I'm not saying they're the only ones that force people into lanes, but just
No,
don't
no.
try to force people into lanes, right? Like,
Yeah. Because there's
um,
lots of people that try to force us into lanes, whether it's like in the secular world or religious, right? Or
absolutely.
spiritual
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
like politics. It's
Oh,
always about trying to get people in your lane,
totally. Yeah. And it seems
right?
like more and more stuff is becoming more like that, where it's
Yeah.
more animosity and more us versus them. And I don't want to really
Yeah.
get into that too much. That's a whole nother
Mm. But
spin-off conversation. But
it's a part of this one, right?
yeah.
Because there's a reason why people are separate and there's so
Mhm.
much division. It's because we have a hard time just allowing each other to be each other, right?
Yeah. And just
And
accepting that the choices other people make are not the choices I would make. That's cool.
it,
Like,
precisely, man. Yeah.
you
And I
know,
think that's one of the reasons why I keep going to the 12-step fellowship rooms,
yeah.
because like despite all of the difficulties that can be present in those rooms, there is an overwhelming sense of welcome, right,
Yeah.
to whoever you are from wherever you come from.
Mhm.
Now that doesn't mean every member in those groups is like on the level with that principle, but every group has that principle, right?
Yeah.
And so it's easier for people to be principled there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
say, because we're all alcoholics. So as soon as I say I'm an alcoholic, man, I have brothers and sisters I didn't even know I had,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the way it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And then, but just like families, sometimes it gets toxic, right? And
Absolutely.
and so it's a part of that process to weed out what is good for us and what's not, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question for you.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
So when we think about spirituality, oftentimes we just simply think of like either organized religion of some sort, or
Mhm.
like you said, Buddhism, or some of those less God-centered types of religions.
Yeah, the
Um,
less popular ones, right?
yeah, but
The ones
yeah,
that have no hierarchy and that
yeah,
have no like dominance. Yeah,
just
those are
just a few
terrible.
billion, just a few billion followers.
Yeah,
Um,
just a few billion.
but do you think, like, as part of recovery, and I mean, you can classify spirituality however you want, but like, do you think it's kind of a necessity as part of it? Like, some people legitimately think that God has helped them through this, right?
Yeah,
And so there's
100%.
that experience, and so they feel like that was the help they needed. And then there's
Yeah.
others that feel like, I connected with a different type of spirituality. For indigenous people, it might be connecting with their culture. For
Mhm.
people from other cultures, it might be getting back to their culture, right? So that kind of
Mhm.
spirituality. But is
Yeah.
there like, so then it leaves the atheist? Well, there's no spirituality. But I think, to me, the way I look at spirituality is, it's not just about like, oh, the mystical world of magic.
Mhm.
It's like, but you're looking inward and you're finding strength there.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, even if it's
Yeah.
your spirit, like you believe in you,
Mhm.
to me, that's kind of a form of spirituality, because you
Well,
you found a strength you didn't know you had.
well, Darcy,
So
that is 100% a form of spirituality as well as a part of religious beliefs, right? Like
yeah,
the the Atman is the God inside, the God
exactly.
inside of
Yeah.
all of us, right? And
The
there's a
Buddha
lot of
is inside all
yeah,
of us. Yeah.
and the Buddha, um, whatever else it is too, right? Like some people
Hmm.
say Christ is a part of them, right? Like if that's
Yeah.
they're a part of Christ, and I understand that, like what they're
Yep.
saying. I may not fully believe in how they're saying. Oh, sorry. Um, just like kicking my camera over here.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, and it's not for me to like argue how people describe it,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's one of those things, right?
Yep.
It's like if you say describe to me this painting, I'm going to describe it to you, and then if you describe it at the same time in a separate room, it'll be different,
Totally.
right?
And
Like
even
chances
if you
chances are.
describe it, I will imagine it from your description differently than what it actually is, right?
Absolutely, man. Right. And I think that's the least we can do for each other is kind of
Yeah.
like get out of the way and just be
Yeah.
like, hey, man, like if that works for you and you're not hurting anyone, right, or yourself, fucking A, man, you
Well, and
know?
I think that's the great thing of all of the shows we've done with all the guests. I mean, if anybody's listened to some or all of them, which all would be better, so listen up.
Every one of them.
That's
Hey, right now, Darcy wants you to go out there and download every
right.
episode
It is your
that
your
we've ever
homework.
done. That's your
But
homework, right? It's
it
your
sure
mission.
shows how you can just like it's a variety of ways to be in recovery. We've had people that yoga, like that
Hmm.
was their spiritual kind of connection,
Yeah.
or for some people like yourself, meditation. So
Hmm.
it's like, it's so wide in variety. I
Yeah.
just I just don't know how you can pigeonhole things anymore. Like,
Yeah.
maybe 40, 50 years ago that worked, but I think we know more and we understand more, certainly about recovery.
Well,
Um,
yeah, like that's a good point, right? Because the medical community does understand way more than they did 100 years ago,
yeah,
right? Like there's no
yeah,
question. I mean, the medical knowledge has changed drastically in 20 years, let alone
yeah,
100, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know, man. The information that's available for people is there, like if they
Yep.
want it, right? And so,
Yeah.
like the brain story, and going through, like if anyone has an opportunity, like if you're not religiously inclined or spiritually inclined, it's perfectly fine, because there's other ways to learn about what goes on in us, right?
Yeah.
When we're involved in addiction or we have mental health difficulties or mental illness, um, there's lots of ways we can learn about it, like biology of it,
Oh,
like
for sure. Yeah.
you know. And I'm not saying that we should worship anything, to be honest. My ideas are to question everything and allow for anything, right? Like
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
allow for anything that is, I don't know, man. I guess the least harmful.
Yeah.
I
Well,
really don't
I
know how else to describe it.
I just see it like, if honestly, like, I'm not a religious guy as far as organized religions, Christianity, all that. Wasn't raised that way. So But if
Come
somebody
on,
said
man.
to
I
me,
know you're like deep down a Quaker.
yeah,
That beard is a Quaker
that's it.
beard if I ever saw one,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. No, I got the suit on. Yeah.
Yeah, you
But
do.
now where was I going with that, man?
Quakers rule.
Totally
Sorry,
derailed
man.
that. No,
Sorry, dude.
it's all right.
You just fell victim to my brain, is what you did.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry,
Yeah.
man.
No, I totally lost it now.
Yeah, and I can't remember what it was.
Well, I'm sure it was really good, really
Dude,
awe-inspiring.
I know it was because you're really good and
I'll
awe-inspiring.
remember it like the minute we had stopped recording.
You were you
That.
were you were saying that you're not religious or believe in any sort of
Right.
like,
Oh, yeah. So,
yeah,
but like if somebody said, "Oh, well, I found God and I pray 12 times a day to Jesus, and that keeps me sober," like, what am I to say that's wrong? Right. Like,
yeah, man.
and vice versa. Like, I hope it would work the other way around where
Yeah.
maybe I don't need that. But
Well,
yeah.
but you touch on an interesting point, because it's okay for us to be like, hey, man, if praising Jesus works for you, go praise
Yeah.
Jesus, man. Like, praise Jesus all day long if that keeps you clean and sober and helps you become like I don't know, a more a better you, whatever that looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Like, by all means, but please return the favor, right? Like, return the favor when someone says, hey, like, I want to worship mermaids, right? Like,
Yeah.
return the favor, because
Yeah.
because the virgin born son and the resurrection are equally as hard to believe as mermaids.
Yeah.
Okay, like,
Yeah.
all of that stuff is like, and I get it. I mean, me saying that right now is probably going to cause some issues, but I mean it in with all due respect, right? Like,
Yeah.
because you're both ideas ask us to suspend disbelief, right?
Yes.
And in that suspending that disbelief, accept a wholesale idea, right? That doesn't fully make sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, yeah, you could get into a really good religious debate about a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I got no need to debate.
But I just know from seeing the guests and stuff like that, it's very interesting to me how it's always somebody didn't like the 12 step because of the religious aspect. So they went and found cognitive behavioral therapy. And then, somebody else had come along and they went to that 12 step and they found like Jesus helped them through that. And to me, it's really interesting how you can take, hurt people and they have totally different experience with that whole process.
Yeah, man.
It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's you're right, man. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And like, I'm waiting to hear back on this, and I think you and I talked about it briefly. But I'm one of my friends is a priestess, right?
Right.
A Wiccan priestess.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely fascinated, right, by it, because this person is in recovery and has found a path that works for her, right?
Yeah.
Or him. I mean, to be honest, I think they identify that way, but it doesn't really matter. But anyway, I said priestess, so obviously it's probably a female human. Nonetheless, like, whatever the path is, right? And I reached out asking if they'd be interested in coming on, and honestly, I really hope that they can. I hope there's no like issues with talking about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, there again, I think, we really denigrate a lot of belief systems,
and I don't want
spiritual
that,
practices. Man. And that's the thing, like, I don't like beyond recovery. I think if you're not harming other people, then I think you just do what makes you happy.
Do what feels right.
Yeah. And I think this is a great example of that. I mean, if like going down that path of being a Wiccan is what helps her stay on the road to recovery. I mean,
and
who
just
am I to judge?
Like, right? Like, who are we to judge? And also, like, that could be the key that unlocks her happiness, not like,
well, yeah, and obviously she's helping others if she's a priestess. I'm assuming that she probably has others that are like come to her for advice and things like that. So
I would imagine. I mean, I have
yeah.
honestly no idea.
So
I
I mean,
have no idea about it.
she's probably found a wonderful community that's probably really supportive, really
Yeah.
positive for her in her life. So I mean, that's pretty
Mhm.
awesome, you know.
I agree. I think if we can do that, man, we've made it pretty good,
Yeah.
right? You find
Well,
a
and I
community
mean, how
you fit
much
into.
easier would it be to be in recovery if you're surrounded with a community of people that actually care about you, want to see you do well, you know,
Mhm.
want to be there for you, and vice versa. You know, like that's pretty amazing. I mean, that is kind of what you're looking for.
I would think so, man.
I mean,
I think like, and whatever, I don't know. And everybody has a different idea as to what our purposes are, right?
yeah.
And what I really liked was I read it in, I think it was Eckhart Tolle's book, um, A New Earth, but I can't remember. So it might be from there. But it just talks about the purposes right now, right? Like
Mm,
there is no other purpose for you and I to be here but to do this as we're doing it, right? Like
absolutely. Yeah.
this is our purpose. And I guess for a podcast is a tangible example of purpose, right?
Yep.
We are
Right here in the
purposely,
moment.
yeah, and we purposely set this time aside and we
Yep.
purposely engage on this subject, even though I'm sure for you, just like me, it is a tricky subject, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The religion and faith-based stuff, you know,
Yeah.
and by
Well, especially
faith-based,
now
I
that I'm
just
in the
mean
Bible
more
Belt.
religious, right? It's right, dude. Is Lethbridge like the tip of the sword for the Bible Belt, or
No, it's the full on, I think, Bible Belt area of like the Cardston, Lethbridge, that whole
yeah?
kind of area is
Okay,
the kind of the Bible Belt. Yeah.
yeah.
Cardston's got the big Mormon temple that was like the first one in North America or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive if you're into pure
Yeah,
white temples. So
I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Like if you go inside a temple, though, you're gonna be pretty amazed, right? Like
I would
most,
imagine, yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know about this particular temple,
Oh, I'm
but I
sure it's
mean,
nice inside.
yeah. Well, and this ties into the attraction, though, right? The
Yeah.
attraction, and this is something that we talk about in the 12-step fellowships is we want to make it attraction, not promotion, right?
Yeah.
And so, however, it's a different kind of attraction.
Yeah.
The big church, the big temples and all that kind of stuff, that's attraction. And then you're promoting something that's impossible, right?
Hmm.
Like um to ever really go to heaven
Yeah.
is basically impossible, right?
Yeah.
Like and I say that full well knowing people will be angry with me. But
Yeah.
like honestly, um the priests that tell people how to get to heaven, a big portion of them have been abusing children since
Yeah.
the conception of this church, right?
Yeah.
Or formalization of it. I don't know really when that started, but that'd be interesting to look up as well, right?
You know,
When
it's funny. I heard a comedian a long time ago, and he was talking about it, I don't think it was Robin Williams, but it was an old timer comedian, and he was talking about you don't go to a doctor who's like 85 pounds overweight, smoking a cigarette and eating a cheeseburger to tell you how to be healthy.
yeah,
If that's your doctor, you need to
yeah.
find a new one.
Well,
And I
if
kind
your
of feel like
purpose is to get healthy, yeah.
yeah, and I kind of feel like that's the same thing here, where it's like if you're part of an organization that is well and fully knowing and documented that
Hmm.
they've hit the hide the priest game quite a bit.
Yeah,
Like I don't know if shouldn't you question like maybe the team you're on or
yeah,
the
dude,
efficacy of the message getting across.
right?
If
Yeah.
I don't know, it just I don't know if I would go to somebody who's doing that and condoning that for my
And
spiritual
basing,
leadership.
yeah, and basing my morality on their teachings. I'm going to use quotation marks
Yeah,
because that's all they are, is teachings. They're not like, it's not the pure, you know, do good kind of stuff, right? It's
no,
just a bunch of hogwash. And we have to remember, and I'm going to keep saying this throughout this episode, 210,000 children reportedly abused by the Catholic Church in France in 70 years. 210,000.
yeah,
report it. And
Well, yeah,
that's crazy, man. That's ludicrous. That's one country, Darcy.
Yeah. Well, and what were they doing everywhere else? I mean, when you look at when
Right?
they went into Ireland and Scotland, and like
Uh-huh.
they destroyed languages and cultures and raped and tortured and pillaged and murdered. The Crusades, like there's just so much violence and bloodshed around religion.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, if I don't even know if you can move past it, because it's just, there's people that are still living that have experienced that violence.
And that's a good point, man.
You know?
Move past it. And who
Yeah.
is to say that anyone should move past anything, right? At least of all, the church.
Yeah,
right?
like and
The
how
church
do you,
telling
when that's
anybody.
supposed to be
Yeah.
like the safe place? Everybody says, oh, well, if you're in trouble, go to the church or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, man.
And they're the ones telling you, right? They're the ones telling
Yeah.
you to move forward. Forgive, man. You're supposed
Yeah.
to forgive, right? And it's like, oh yeah, we're supposed to forgive. That means we should allow you to continue doing this awful shit forever, like that. And so that to me is kind of ludicrous. But I'm sure I'm not alone there. Like,
Well, I've
seems,
always said they should take all these churches that were involved in like residential schools and all that, and remove their tax-free status permanently. You can never have it back, and that money goes to pay for what you did to your victims.
Yeah, I agree. Man, something's got to happen, right? They've got to pay some sort of, and money's not good enough. Like money.
No, it's not. But it's the only thing we have today that people value.
Yeah, I don't mean. I just mean paying people isn't enough.
No,
there
it's
needs
not.
to be more money put into it in terms of making, like the taxes. There needs to be reparations made.
Yeah, like we need to get people healthy. We need to invest in health.
Absolutely, man.
Like
and if
mental
we're
health
do that,
and yeah,
man. And I'm not suggesting what people should or shouldn't believe in. Man, by all means, believe in whatever you want, right? Like believe in Catholicism. That's great, man, for you.
Well, I think it's hilarious.
But just ask yourself.
Yeah.
That's all. Ask yourself those questions.
Well, and what goes on? Like if you're going to join any organization, don't you want to know kind of like, hey, these guys why are all these little kids coming in here? And this is what is going on? Like, I just ask yourself if this is really the place for you. I mean, God and your belief in God is one thing. That doesn't, you don't have to go to a church for that. You don't have to do those things. So
I would assume if there is a God, that God wouldn't require such trivialities, right?
Right.
Like such things as creating these monolith, like giant churches and
made out of gold.
Like the mega churches. Yeah, the gold. The mega church is basically the gold temple of the present, right?
Yeah.
Like you create a campus church.
On the topic of spirituality, how funny was it that the Satanists in Texas were getting all the press for like a good solid week because they were going to go and fight their abortion bill based on religious exemption?
Yep.
And people honestly were like, wow, they're probably going to win. And so I just seen it on like a few CNN and stuff had these little clips of like Satanists are now like the heroes of Texas. And I'm like, see, it's just whatever makes you happy.
But dude, isn't it interesting that like the people and groups that have been demonized, and not just groups and people, but even like tangible things, right?
Yeah.
Like cannabis demonized, right?
Yeah.
Other things, chemical stuff demonized, right?
Totally.
Like, and all of it done for a purpose, right? And over time, you start to learn that purpose about it.
For sure.
It's the same with witchcraft and Wiccan or Wicca and Satanism too. It's like I get it. Look, if Satan is Satan and God is God, and man, that might scare you, right? Like if you believe that. I mean, I could see why that would scare you.
For sure.
But like really, it's another group.
Yeah.
It's another group, man. And I don't think there are any reported, like, or not commonly reported issues of satanic like killings, are there? Like actual killings?
Not I think in myth and mythology, I'm sure there's some made up stories.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's a lot of actual truly satanic, like murders,
Yeah.
tortures, rapes, kidnappings.
That's what I
I just
mean.
don't,
Like
it doesn't make the
actual,
news anyway. And I think it would if it was out there.
I would think that we would be hearing about it all the time,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like if there was a constant, repetitive, ritualistic satanic killings, we'd be hearing
Right.
about it all the time,
And
right?
not just from Alex Jones either.
Yeah. I'm yeah, like legitimate satanic ritual killings. Yeah, not
Exactly.
Alex Jones
Yeah.
satanic ritual killings.
Did you hear he's on the hook for Sandy Hook? He
What?
yeah, he lost his he didn't submit documents. He didn't give it the other attorneys any of his evidence. So they
Yeah.
just found him and by default he lost.
Oh my
So now it's
goodness.
got to
Eh?
go to a jury how much money he owes all the victims of Sandy Hook,
Yeah.
all their families. It's going to be
Oh my God.
millions, man, millions.
Dude. Well, I
But I
mean,
mean, the guy's like, he's loaded, man, from
is
that
he?
stupid show. Yeah. So anyway, I
Yeah.
totally got off track there.
That's okay, man. But there's another thing. You just brought up something else that's kind of interesting now in terms of like spirituality and guidance on
Yeah.
principles. YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like we could talk about that as well because to some people, like there's different programs out there where that host or that personality becomes like a spiritual guru,
Mm,
right? Or a life guru
yeah.
to be, you know what I mean? Like, and
Totally.
don't get me wrong, we're always going to be passing on some really good ideas and some probably not so good for different
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about it is that the internet has become kind of a medium
Oh
for
yeah.
for different theories, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely. Well, and
so
just
the kind,
access to a lot of different things too. Like you can do
mhm,
guided meditations. You can do, you can have sleep meditations play on
yeah,
YouTube for 8 hours. You can have like just all sorts of kind of cool things are available out there too.
I agree. Yeah, it's changed and it's made a variety possible, right? Like
Yeah.
where you no longer have to just like pretend to suffer through something. You can actually
Absolutely.
find something that helps you,
Yeah.
you know. And I think maybe that's hard for some of us to handle, right? Is that now it's opened up, you know.
Yeah.
I feel liberated by that fact, but not everybody will,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I forget that because sometimes what keeps us solid are some of our beliefs,
Yeah.
whether those beliefs true or not.
Hmm.
Like whether it's a belief in something true or not is irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
Because those beliefs help us exist, you
Yeah.
know. And when you mentioned something earlier about um, thinking God got us sober, I believe that for a long time,
Yeah.
right? And I still believe that something outside of myself brought me into that meeting.
Hmm.
But would I describe it as God? I have no idea anymore, right?
Yeah.
Um, if using the term God helps people understand, I'll use the term God, but
Sure.
it's not a Christian God, it's not a Muslim God,
Yep.
it's not that God, right? It's a completely open concept God, which
Yeah.
means indifferent, cruel,
Yeah.
like all the things that the universe seems to be, right?
Yeah.
Like I say cruel, kind of laughing because can the universe be cruel if it's indifferent? I
Hmm.
don't think it can be, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's an indifferent energy, how can that be cruel? It's
Yeah.
just doing what it does, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so anyway, I don't know, but even saying that, it's just doing what it does. That comes into conflict with people thinking they can change what things do,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like people thinking they can change the world around them as opposed to changing themselves within the world, right? And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we're all guilty of that from time to time.
100%, dude. And it's reinforced by the practices of I'm special, I should be able to do this,
Yeah.
right? And
Absolutely.
and that's okay. I'm glad that we think we're special. I think we're special in a totally different way, though. I
Yeah.
don't think we're, that special from one another. We're all very special,
Yeah.
but we're together special, not isolated special,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're always trying to even introverts like I I don't like those kinds of labels, but I mean, that's what we have. It's kind of like the God thing where, well, that's
Yeah.
everybody understands those terms. But I think even for a lot of introverts, it's not that they like isolation so much, it's that they like having smaller groups of friends, like
Mhm.
one-on-one more than one-on-five, like more than a
Yeah.
group setting. And I really, because I'm not a big group setting kind of guy, but I love having conversations one-on-one.
Mhm. Yeah,
um
me too.
so I think it's just, I don't even know where I was going with this now, but I just think it's kind of the labels we put on things, and I think we should,
Mhm.
just yeah, totally lost where I was going with that, man.
Dude, no, you're talking about labels, and that's where you started, right? Was we don't have to label everything. Because the
Yeah,
truth of the matter is, and I don't know if this is where you were going or not, but what it got me thinking about, or I guess attaching to, was thinking about friendships as a spiritual tool, right? Because
absolutely.
there's nothing in my mind more, well, it's very spiritual practice to engage in friendship, right?
Yes,
Like,
it should be.
and
Yeah.
well, I think it is. I think it
Yeah.
does. Well, I feel it does things to me,
Oh, sure.
spiritually, right? Like being with your friend, being friends with Dominic, with
Yeah,
John, with my brothers, like those relationships enhance my life,
totally.
right? Like, and definitely in a spiritual sense too,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a sense of belonging, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what I mean. Like, I think for spiritual, like I always just see it like, if I'm feeling happy or sad, like that's to me is the spirit of us. Like your emotions, these things that you don't necessarily have control over,
mhm,
that just happen. Like sometimes you're irrationally mad,
yeah.
everything's going great. And then one little thing happens and you're just like red zone. And that makes no sense. So where did that come
Mhm,
from? And to me, that's
yeah.
kind of what I mean by spirituality, is like, it's just that stuff, the stuff that we don't control. Then
Mhm,
to me, it's like, well, I have to just accept that something's controlling it,
yeah.
like, I don't know. So, but yeah, I just think it's, yeah, I don't know. I think we need to let go and stop trying to control it.
Mm,
But I think that
yeah.
is very, very difficult to do. It's easier to say, but very hard to do.
Yeah, you said it, man. It is.
Yeah.
It's easy to say. I mean, and I think it's easy to say because it's just so obvious, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the obvious answer, you know. But like on another, I guess, part of spirituality for me, or living a spiritual life, has become fasting,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Um, it's and I mean, I don't really know where it fits in fully,
Yep.
only that it does really have a positive effect so far on my mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, right?
Yeah.
And physical too, because I've been more active
Yeah.
um, and staying active. The more I practice this, like this time, my first day on the fast was yesterday, so today's day 2. So
Hmm.
forgive me if I start rambling and shit, because seriously, I haven't had anything to eat, only water and some tea,
Nice.
and nothing in the tea. Um, but anyways, so yesterday was the first day, and I did more activities than I did the last couple times
Okay.
on the fast, so that I could see how much I can do.
Yeah.
Because part of what I think it's opened up I guess a different perspective for me, is just trying to increase the practice, right? Like
Hmm.
much with meditation, like what
Yeah.
if I'm still, I mean, 5 minutes a day is better than nothing, no matter what, right?
Mm.
Um, but like I wanted to increase my practice, and so
Yeah.
increasing the practice brings is his own reward, right?
Hmm.
Because it means I'm spending much less time worrying when I'm spending more time practicing, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, and so of course that helps.
Yeah.
Um, Now I don't know where I was going with that, dude. Like I
Well,
just,
I think that's a very
boom.
well, I think the whole concept of fasting, because I mean, let's be real, this isn't a new concept. This has been happening
No,
for thousands and
jeez,
thousands of years. Humans have been doing this. It's like saunas and
yeah.
sweat lodges and things like that. Humans have been sweating for thousands of years too. So
Which is
it's,
exactly why I'm trying it, because it's worked
well,
for so
and
many,
I think
right?
there's a reason that
Mhm,
that you feel, in your words, you feel a spiritual experience through it. And I think
mhm.
that's the whole point of it. And I think that's why we've been doing it for thousands of years,
Yeah.
is that there is some sort of different. You're going to come out of it different than when you went in. And
Oh yeah.
I think that's the spiritual connection. Others are going to experience it differently, but I think the fact that you're going to come out with some introspective thoughts, or some, maybe, hey, well, moving forward, maybe this, or
Mhm.
just some, you're going to end up reflecting on something, and you're going to
Yeah.
come up with some answers. And I think that's
Yeah.
the spiritual growth that you get from that, right?
I agree, man.
Yeah.
There's something happening, right? And again, articulating it's difficult, but there's definitely and I guess it's more of a connection to that, um, like the
Yeah.
Hindu says, like the Atman. I think I'm pronouncing it right, but
Yeah.
it's that God inside, right?
Yeah.
And that little piece of God, that little piece of the universe, right? That's in all of
Yeah.
us. And I think once I clear away a lot of the, I guess, the day-to-day like humdrum thoughts, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna eat this or what,
Mhm.
whatever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm gonna start thinking about food tomorrow, right? Like towards the end of the third day, I'm gonna
Oh
start
yeah.
planning my meal for the first day, right? And it'll start with strawberries for sure,
Right on.
because that is a good way to come off the fast.
Isn't it though? Oh
Oh,
man.
buddy, it was such a nice transition.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you giving me that tip, because it just, yeah, it set my whole day in the
Yeah.
right trajectory, right? By
Yeah.
not going too hard too quick.
And I found,
So,
if you, and I mean, you can eat the whole package of strawberries or whatever, but I found
yeah.
that was because, like, when I was doing fasting, it was an indigenous ceremony. So there was a feast after. But
Mm,
as soon as you come out, yeah, or as soon as I came out, in this particular ceremony, they gave me strawberries. And
mhm.
I found later when the feast came, I was more than prepared, like more than prepared to
Yeah.
eat now. Whereas I
Yeah.
don't know if I could have really eaten much of that kind of food, like gravy,
Mhm.
turkey, and potatoes and
Yeah,
vegetables,
that
like,
hearty stuff. Yeah.
yeah, like maybe some of the vegetables or something, a little light, but yeah. So I
Mhm.
think strawberries are awesome. Just, sorry, sidelined.
No, dude, and you're right, they are awesome, because it set me up to have a really good day.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just a good day in terms of like being able to pig out, because
Yeah. Yeah.
actually quite the opposite. What it did was it set me off on a controlled day, like
Yep.
because I didn't want to go right into like, I don't want to binge eat ever, right?
Yep.
So what I'm trying to do with this is change my relationship to food, right?
Yeah.
And learn that I don't need to binge.
Yeah.
And sometimes a binge, I don't mean like, God, I haven't done like a real binge on food in a while. Um, but I have like eaten lots of junk food,
Yeah.
right? And so I guess that's the closest thing I get to a real binge, is
Yeah.
having a lot of junk food one night or two
Mhm.
nights or whatever. Mind you, towards last year, the 2020 was a tough year, so I did binge a lot. I did binge on chocolate.
I think we
I did.
all probably binged a little.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I did. I was thinking about 2020 and I'm like, yep, I did some chocolate binging. There's no question. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because to the point where when I was leaving the dollar store,
Yeah.
the cashier had asked me, I remember must have been it was either April or May of the first lockdown, like
Yeah.
in 2020 there. And she said to me, she goes, "You're not going to eat all that tonight, are you?" And I said, "God, no, I'd die." I said, "It'll probably take me 3." And she just shook her head and she was like, "Oh gosh," she was probably praying for me, dude, as I was
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
out of there. Like, you're on your way to die, man. Um, but yeah, it was just such a dark time, but no time to slow down, right?
Yeah.
Like, because work was so busy at that time.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the spiritual practice of fasting, right? It really hit me when I started intermittent fasting a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
right? I tried it and I was like, holy crap, like what a amazing feeling to know that I'm not going to die if I don't have 3 full meals a day,
Yeah.
right? With snacks in between. Like,
Yep.
dude, seriously, I don't know who taught me that or if I just kind of wanted it to be that way.
Yeah.
But I vaguely remember growing up with like thinking about 3 meals and snacks,
Oh,
right?
totally.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of food, man.
Yeah. Well, I know there was even I've done workout programs and
Oh, buddy.
shit where they're like, no, you got to eat 5 meals a day every 2
Mm-hmm.
hours. shit like that. And it's like, yeah, that might work, but
If you're training, man, like there's a big difference.
yeah,
If you're involved in like rigorous training, then
yeah.
yeah, every 2 hours you need to fuel, right? 100%.
But your
But
day-to-day workout guys like me,
dude, yeah, or
I
me,
can
like no,
easily
man.
intermittent fast and I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we just want to time our eating around the workouts, right? So
Yeah,
that we don't
exactly.
cause ourselves any stress.
So do you
Um,
find when you're doing the fast, and I mean, may have talked about this before, but I always found that fourth day, like everybody expects you to come out like tired and just wore out and
mm,
like you have
yeah,
no energy. But I always found fourth day was the energy day. Like, I don't know if it
dude,
was the excitement of being done or what, but it was like the
yeah,
third day was the hard day. And the
yeah.
fourth day, I was like, oh, I can do this for 10 more days.
Oh yeah, by the fourth day, it does. You're right. It feels like yeah, I could go for 5 days,
Yeah, right.
or even a week.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good to do that. So anyone watching or listening, like, don't go
I
out
don't
and do
know.
that. But even and having said that, don't go out and do the 4 day fast if you have medical conditions,
Oh, yeah,
right?
totally.
Don't go out and do the intermittent fasting if you need to consult with a physician. Like all the things we're talking about here, in order for them to be like valuable and helpful to you, it has to be done in a healthy way, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if I was, say, I had a medical condition that I had to eat a certain amount of sugar in a certain amount of
Yeah.
time or whatever, well then I have to eat,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't mess around with that. And maybe, I
Yeah.
mean, who knows? Eventually, after fasting for 4 days every month for a while, I'll have to start eating. I mean, who knows, right?
Who
And
knows?
if the body changes, well, then I'll change with it, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to adapt. Um, and I think part of the ability to adapt comes from going through different things, right? Like we talked about on the episode of change, you know,
Yeah.
um, once we go through stuff, we figure out how to go through it.
Yeah.
And it tends to be not as hard, right?
Absolutely.
On us. It might be difficult shit, but it just doesn't take the same toll on us,
Yeah.
over time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You
Because
learn from every time you get you go through something tough or whatever, you learn from it.
yeah, yeah, it's like a fighter. If you're a fighter, like you learn from your mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the difference is that in life you don't tend to get knocked out right away.
Yeah.
Right?
Or
It's just
if you're moving from Calgary to Lethbridge, you learn next time you're gonna hire movers. Yep.
that's
Yep.
right, dude. Oh, you guys didn't hire movers.
No,
Yeah,
we didn't.
no, you did not.
No, we did not.
Yeah, but you know what, man? It's almost done, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much done. So I can't complain.
And so to continue on with this, I'm glad it's almost done,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I didn't want to forget the question about your meditation practices and how they help you in your like constantly changing new life. Like how has
Well,
that come in?
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've started to realize is you can meditate almost all day long, every day, every day. So
Mhm.
I try to find even at work, I don't work in a stressful environment. I'm going to be honest. I work for a retail cannabis place and everybody there
Mhm.
smokes cannabis. Everybody there is pretty relaxed. So
Yep.
it's pretty relaxed environment, but just even still like the stress of the house or life or whatever, the bike isn't running as good as I think it should or something. I just find it's taking the moments, like just take 1 minute to just breathe, you know.
Mhm.
Um once I get this house thing all settled out, I am going to be coming back to Calgary on the weekends to do floats and things like that. And
Yeah.
for me, I think, I mean, I don't mean to plug Joe Rogan at all, but if I could buy a float tank, I friggin' would. Like
Yeah.
that, I wish I had the money to do that because man, those things are
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
But again, they're not for everyone.
Yeah.
Like
But this
I
is a
love
good,
it, but
yeah. But it's the same thing. It's another practice that you learn by listening to other people talk about stuff, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and and that can be, I mean, that's as useful to me. That's as useful as going to church, right? Like,
hmm
it's to so many people it is, um, and honestly,
absolutely,
to many people, it's the same thing, right? Like, it
totally,
is where they get their inspiration, where they get their connection to community, right?
yep,
Because you can look up any kind of podcast. You can
yeah,
look up any
totally,
kind of information you want to learn about.
yep,
Um,
Well,
And I
there's
mean, it was,
intermittent fasting podcasts. That's where I first
yeah,
learned about it. So yeah,
yeah,
totally.
precisely. Same here. I learned from it on like listening on a podcast, and then I started like reading some stuff about it.
For
And
sure.
I say reading some stuff because I mean some just a little bit of stuff, and then listen to more podcasts about it, and try
Yeah,
to figure out
absolutely.
the best way for me to go. Right.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing is like I really for me I think floating, because like I mean it's an hour of floating and meditating, but
Mm-hmm.
because there's no sensory input, I just find it like it's like fasting and on fast track.
Mm-hmm.
Um you're able to just, I found after the first few times you're able to kind of slip into that mentality, like your brain
Mm-hmm.
just slips into that mode faster.
Yeah.
And man, like it is amazing kind of the things you come away with from that. Like
Oh.
just the introspective stuff, like, oh, maybe I should,
Mm-hmm.
here, how can I be kinder? How can I deal with this situation differently? Like
Mm-hmm.
it just gives you that time to just focus on those single things in
Mm-hmm.
that moment. Like, and as opposed to like having the input, oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, I can hear the noise outside, or
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when you're meditating, I find it hard because there is so much background noise.
Yeah.
But I just, yeah, for me, the float tanks are awesome. They're kind of like
Mm.
fasting, and
Dude,
I enjoy fasting too. So
yeah, I agree. The float tanks are pretty great.
yeah,
Like that time you and I shared a tank and floated, that was, dude,
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
That happens.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that time.
No, but
Yeah,
that time we went and had
yeah,
separate tanks,
yes,
it was very much meditative, man. It was
right,
so easy to get into that meditative state in there
totally.
because there's no stimulation. Like there's, and then I was kind of surprised that, man, my brain doesn't constantly think about crazy shit all the time, right?
Yeah,
Like, and when you're laying in that tank going, thank God I don't think like that anymore.
right.
You go crawl out of your skin in there. Yeah, I that's meditative for sure.
Yeah,
I would, there's no doubt about it.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I don't know. Is there anything else about spirituality and religion and recovery and
Well, no, I think the key is like whatever works for people, right? I
yeah,
just I think that part of this conversation I had with my colleague today, we mentioned the fact that at what point um, do we allow some connections to be okay and other connections not to be okay, right?
yeah,
And he was talking specifically about, say, an organization like Edmonton Police Service having oh, now I lost my train of thought. What was I saying, dude?
oh, you were saying oh, just, oh shit,
Shit. We were talking about the God darn it.
well, something not being equal, like
I completely fucking lost it. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's gone.
we judge some things to be okay but other things not
Oh,
to be.
yes, connection. So like say Edmonton Police Service. Now I'm making this up, okay? I'm not, this
Okay,
isn't necessarily true. It might be true. I just don't know that it is.
yeah,
But Edmonton Police Service, say they join forces and have like a informal or formal, depending on how you want to look at it, partnership with the Catholic Church, the
yeah,
Catholic Church of Canada. Okay. So they want to have this partnership. Is that okay? When it would definitely not be okay for the Edmonton Police Service to partner up with a known and arrested, convicted pedophile,
yes,
right?
yeah, yeah,
They wouldn't partner up with it to save their life. Like if
right,
even if it was to save their life, they would rather die than do that,
yeah, yeah,
and rightfully so, right?
yeah, yeah,
So we simply we were just pontificating about it and saying that's an interesting question, right? Like
hmm,
because we do have these agreements with organizations that are suspect,
yeah,
right? Now, and don't get me wrong, my phone probably part of a suspect organization. I just don't know about it, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so I guess the question is, if we don't know, I mean, does it change things?
yeah,
Would that, like, would it be, are we fooling ourselves to not look at that organization like Edmonton Police partnering with the Catholic Church of Canada, or say we'll just change it, say the United Church of Canada,
hmm,
who are guilty of atrocities, right? Like
yep,
in, like, would they would definitely accept that partnership versus a partnership with someone who's who is a known sex offender,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or a known, say, child murderer,
Yep.
right? Considering the history of the church in Canada, right? And
Exactly.
oh, hi there, buddy. Floyd's poking around. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I don't have an answer, right? Like these
Yep.
are questions that like I do think about from time to time.
Yeah.
And for my money though, we are allowed to think about these things and question these things, right? And we are absolutely allowed to wonder whether we are in a good place or not, right?
Absolutely.
Regardless of what we've been told in the past. Like
Yeah.
it is 100% up to us to check things out in the present, right?
Oh, for sure.
Especially because some of us, I shouldn't say we all, because I know that not everybody has access to information like you and I do, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
we are very privileged. We can access any information at any time,
Yep.
unless somebody hacks Facebook and Instagram. And then we are helpless children.
Yeah, that's right.
That was so funny, dude.
Oh my
And I
God.
didn't even barely notice. Like you probably didn't either because you were working.
No.
Yeah, I was plugging away too, so I didn't even really notice. And then all of a sudden it was back up, and I'm seeing all the memes, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
all
no,
the
I
memes.
heard
Oh my
about it like
God.
afterwards too. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured you heard about it like later because you're
Yeah.
working, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's pretty funny, man, how tied into our lives that stuff is.
Oh, totally.
You know,
Yeah,
because I mean,
completely.
if say it was down for 2 days, or
Oh shit, yeah.
we couldn't publish or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
who knows what happens, man?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, all of a
Yeah.
sudden the road warrior comes down the road. He's got that like that giant like head with horns on it, and he's swinging his battle axe or whatever the shit he was swinging.
Good old Mad
Um,
Max.
right? Yeah,
That's
good
where we're
old
headed,
Mad
man.
Max.
That's where we're headed. No, I'm just kidding.
Dude. I mean, if you listen to some people, we are headed there. We're
Oh, for
already
sure,
there,
right?
right? And it is, yeah, it's an interesting time, that's for sure.
Well, that's for sure.
I don't think that it's the worst time we've ever had on this planet,
Not even close. Nope.
because we've had some pretty rough times.
Yes, yes, I think so.
You know, but this is a time like where what was it? Oh, okay, I almost remembered the quote from this afternoon talking with my colleague, that
Oh,
he said it was brilliant, but it was about truth and reconciliation.
yeah, yeah.
And that, well, it might have even been someone else who said it. Anyway, I can't remember the quote, so I'm basically just making shit up at this point. And what were we talking about before I went on that spiral?
Well, you brought up truth and reconciliation, and I think that's an important part of understanding the connection, to me, honestly, between the damage that people have gone through, and like this is where I think it's tough to judge people, because
Yeah,
there's been so much damage that I don't think you can you really like blame somebody for not wanting to go into a church, for not wanting to be around that. Like, when
no,
you hear the stories of survivors, those are not uplifting stories.
no.
And the fact that they can still exist, it amazes me. So I think it's
Mhm.
just one of those things that it's like, I know that a lot of the things people say now is like, you can't have reconciliation without truth and things like that.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we're at, is I think we have to face the truth of what happened.
Well,
And
that's it. And teach the truth.
yeah, and then don't try to, butter it up or make it
Yeah,
easier. It's, my daughter knows about it. She's 14. Like, she's fully
yeah,
aware of what happened. She's
yeah,
heard elder stories. So it's like, I don't know. I think we need to talk about things, get them
yeah.
out in the open, because we
So
need to
like,
find our communities again. We need to find
yes.
our, because what I think has happened is that those things have destroyed a community for people, whether it's the
Mhm.
indigenous community and their families, or whether it's people going, well, I can't go to that church now because that. So it's destroyed communities for a lot of people. And I think
Yeah,
as humans, we want that community and that connection. So
yeah.
I don't know. There's my 2 cents
We do.
at
No,
the
you're
end of the
right,
episode.
man. You're right. And the teaching of the actual history is vital, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we were chatting about, and again, we were just talking about all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
but because we're both, him and I come from a churchy background.
Yeah.
and to a place now where there is no churchy background,
Right.
right? Or no church foreground, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is definitely in the rearview mirror, and there goes Floyd. But we were talking about how an organization, in order to move forward, truth and reconciliation, this is what I was thinking of, was he mentioned that in order for truth and reconciliation to really be started, that the history has to be taught, right?
Yes.
And, like the real history, and
Yep.
not the whitewashed shit. So what we were talking about was, like, say, RCMP. One of the things they should have to learn in Depot is about the RCMP's awful fucking history. They should absolutely have to learn that, because you know what they do learn? They learn all the rah, shine your boots bullshit, right? And they don't learn about what the RCMP has really been about since its conception.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's true. I think we have to, and that's why, when it comes to, whether people believe in God or not, I think there's just no room for judgment, because you don't know that person's personal experience with that particular religion or faith. Or
I'll never judge someone for believing, man.
No,
absolutely not. I won't even judge them for being shitty, because that's between them and their whatever they believe in, right? It's not my place to judge at all, like, regardless. Because every time I mean, literally, this is so true for me, and it sucks that it's a really good, like, biblical saying, because it really is a good saying. But like that pebble in your shoe, like, is nothing compared to the log in my eyeball, right? Like, it's just like, I could sit here and nitpick all kinds of different things, but the fingers are always pointing at me, right? Like, they're and that's, I think, probably one of the ways I've learned not to judge, or to judge less, right? I say not to judge, but that's bullshit. Like, my brain pumps out that garbage, right? But it's about us learning new practices to not follow that garbage down the rabbit hole, right? Like, I don't even know if I'm making sense at this point. But
no, man, I think that's good. And I think, I don't know, I think that's a good way to end the episode.
All right.
On
cool,
that
man.
wisdom and piece of wise advice from Dave.
Not advice, man. I do not give advice.
Dave the Wise.
If you want advice, call 1-800-Darcy Robinson.
No.
I'm sure that's too many letters anyway, but try it. If you're out there in
sure, give it a shot. Why not?
Give it a shot, man. 1-800-Darcy Robinson smells like feet.
Oh, there you go.
That's too long of a phone number, dude. You're gonna have to change that shit.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
We've been talking about this for a long time. But anyway, I do. I think it's true. I think truth and reconciliation, man, to be a real thing, we have to be taught, and we have to teach the truth, right? And not teaching it to make people feel guilty, teaching it so that we don't repeat it, right? Like, that's legitimately the only fucking reason, right? Is so that we can understand the suffering, but so that we can also not repeat this shit, right? Totally. Like, in a perfect world, that would be ideal. But anyway, we live in a very imperfect world, man. Like,
absolutely. But our government's gonna fix it all.
Oh yeah, man, you know it is, dude. And if you think that your world is perfect, just look at this face. Not perfect.
I swear to God, dude, you grew 5 o'clock shadow while we were doing the show.
Dude, I thought the same thing when I came back out, like when I came out here and got on camera.
Yeah.
This was darker when I was looking in the mirror.
No, I swear to God, it was like baby face when you got on here, and now it's like, wow, man. That's good.
Dude, well, I mean, I had a month's growth and it was already like starting to fill in at a month, but it was filling in like very, very gray, my friend. So I think that my beard this winter is probably going to be a gray beard. So
welcome to the club, buddy. Welcome to the club.
I hope I look like you, like a wizard, man. I'm gonna get a fucking wizard hat and everything. Seriously, dude.
Right on, man. All right.
Yeah, man.
Hey, awesome show.
Yeah, man. Shut her down, dude.